I started on here about 35 years ago, moving up into a house that hadn't been lived in since 1963. Didn't come from a gamekeeping, wildlife management background. I actually came from a background of enjoying shooting and hunting myself. But in reality, I was born and bred in the Lake District, lived in the mountains and by the coast where I hunted, fished, and did a lot of rock climbing and various bits like that. And I ended up becoming a teacher in rock climbing and canoeing, and also mathematics, which after a few years decided wasn't for me. Got offered a job with the National Park down there, worked with them for 5 years before someone asked me if I'd like to come and try running Glen Ample. When we started, we were mainly sheep and deer stalking, and that's what it had been in the past. So now we are roughly 5,000 acres of open hill, 3,000 acres of commercial forest, and we're part of a deer management group area. There's 3 other estates plus ourselves that the deer can roam over. The 4 estates will cover a total of about 40,000 acres, and we are in one way completely enclosed either by natural features such as a loch or fences between us and the big commercial state forest, and that allows the 4 estates in the group to manage the herd. And every year we all have to get together and decide roughly what we've got to take out with the deer. The rest of the management on the estate, whether it be pheasant hunting, grouse shooting, anything else, we all look after ourselves in hand. Besides the deer and the bird shooting we do, we've also lucky enough to have a nice burn stream that runs through the glen, which has a decent head of small wild brown trout in. 2 of the ponds in the glen, they're spring fed. They have a nice few trout in. And also the loch frontage that we've got. There's permits sold for people to fish on that because the loch has a good head of brown trout, and it's actually stocked because it's such a popular place now for people to come fishing. One of the things about this area is within about an hour and a half of here live 2/3 of the population of Scotland. That can keep things busy and active, sometimes in ways you want and sometimes in ways you don't want. When I first started in 1989, one of the problems we had then was any deer that were down near tracks or roads stood a chance of getting poached at night. Reasonably organised poaching gangs, driver of a vehicle would come along and shoot one near the roadside, disappear, and then another vehicle would come along a little later and just happen to find a dead deer. In those days, the deer themselves were worth a lot more money for the carcass. Realistically, a couple of deer would make a week's wages for somebody, so it would be worthwhile doing it. So one of the first things I sort of did to try and reduce the poaching was to stop the deer getting near the road. So we moved the deer fence and stopped the deer coming down off the hill into the fields and getting down onto the roadside. Between that, and I think poaching now is sort of not as valuable as it used to be. It very much decreased in this area. Can't say the same for everywhere in the country, but certainly here we don't get much of a problem now with deer wandering off and getting shot at the roadside. One of the other good spin-offs about moving the fencing and stopping the deer disappearing on down to neighbouring farmers' fields. When deer were valuable, it wasn't unknown for them to plant particular crops that would attract the deer down, such as turnips or something like that. And they could shoot them legally as crop protection. So by preventing them travelling down onto these fields, technically we were doing them a favour so they couldn't complain, although a few of them did miss the chance of earning a few extra pounds from shooting deer that they only had on their ground for a couple of nights a year. but it also led to us being able to manage our deer better. You weren't too worried about losing your older, bigger stags, which you want for breeding. Obviously you want to be able to shoot some of the bigger, older stags just as they get past their prime. That keeps the clients happy, and by keeping them all in-house, that really helped the hunting. Over the years, because of various other reasons, we've decreased the overall grazing pressure on the ground by sheep numbers coming down. Sheep numbers have probably come down by 75%. There's probably in the whole of that area now only a couple of thousand sheep. So that's put in a lot less pressure on the ground itself from an ecological side. Although the strange thing is, when it comes to dealing with politicians, the law in Scotland says that we can be told how many deer we can have, and that if we don't shoot enough, they can send a squad in to shoot these deer down to the numbers they require and charge us for the privilege of doing so. If we wanted to put the sheep numbers back up and even put more sheep on than there ever was, they can't and don't say anything. So sometimes you worry whether they're really worried about the ecology or the fact that deer are there for hunting.